When I was in college, a few of my high school friends, I'll call them D, L, and K for this story, and I still loved hanging out at weekends. We would often sit in our local woods, buy alcohol, and have a few drinks together. On one Saturday in July, we decided to head out to a forest a few miles away. It was daylight, and we planned to explore as much of it as possible before it got dark. The forest was really dense in most places, and a lot of daylight would be shrouded in shadow even when the sun was at its highest, but it was calm and peaceful. The forest was located behind a prison, which added some fear, but seeing as it was daylight, we didn't think about it much. Once we stepped into the forest, we pushed our way through into the dense trees. For around 45 minutes, we were chatting away and just catching up as friends do. Not long after, we saw something through the trees in the near distance, and when we reached it, we noticed it was a fully built small cabin. It was a hexagonal shape, with thick log walls and sticks and mud for a roof. We noticed a huge deep fire pit next to the cabin and trash everywhere. It looked as though it was recently used. We were unsettled, but it was daylight and the forest was calm. We shared thoughts about who could have built it, and even suggested an escaped prisoner had wandered into the forest after escaping. Looking back on it now, an escaped prisoner wouldn't hide in the forest behind a prison and build a cabin. We were young, and I guess excited about a mystery. The cabin didn't have a door, so we knew there wasn't anything inside. We did head inside, though, to see what we could see, and when we all stepped in, we noticed a bunch of tools hanging on the log walls. Rusty saws, hammers, and screwdrivers. This unsettled us more, and debated leaving before whoever built this returned. But because we were young adults, and there were 4 of us, we thought we'd be okay, and decided to not just stay, but to take these tools and head even deeper into the forest in an attempt to build our own cabin. After a few hours, we had only put up a few logs before we got bored. We decided to call it a day and head back home, but we left the tools where we had started building our cabin and neglected to return them. Fast forward a week, and we decided to head back to the forest and find that cabin to see if anything had changed. Before we set out, we bought a load of hairspray and marshmallows from our local store so we could build a fire in the fire pit we found. When we got to the forest, it was quite late and the sun was starting to set. This was the plan so we could have a glowing fire in the dark with our drinks and snacks. When we reached the cabin, we noticed it had been completed, destroyed. All the logs were torn down across the site. We debated what could have happened, but we figured that when the person or people who built it returned, found their tools had disappeared, they decided to tear down their cabin because it had been found. We were worried about someone coming back when the fire had lit, but we still wanted to stick to the plan as much as possible. Because the forest was so dense, we decided to move to a different site and hoped the forest would conceal us as much as possible. We walked for around 30 minutes to a new spot, dug a pit, and lit our fire. For a while we had a great time. We had a few drinks, roasted marshmallows, and my friend L, who brought his guitar, played us a few songs. After an hour or so, we saw flashlights between the trees some distance away, followed by shouting. We noticed there were a few men heading towards us, but because the forest was so dense, it was slowing them down. We looked at each other and tried to come up with an idea. We knew the forest would be too hard to navigate in the dark, especially to the south, where it became even thicker and would be cornered. Me and D really wanted to run, but L and K thought they'd be caught anyway, and were going to try and either hide in the area or try and reason with them. Me and D ran for it. We didn't want to head to either side of the men because they would cut us off, so the only option was south, into deeper and thicker forest. We had a flashlight of our own, but we tried to hide as much of the light as possible so the men following would either lose us or not see us. After a grueling 20 minutes of running through thick forest which has scratched almost every part of our bodies, we came to a barbed wire farmer's fence. We looked back and couldn't see anything, but we could hear the men in the distance. We knew we didn't have long, and this fence went on and on both ways. We decided to climb the fence in the hope the men wouldn't follow, so both of us started to climb. I managed to take my hoodie from around my waist and cover some of the barbed wire, but inevitably, some of it did cut us. We managed to make it over to the overside, and instead of continuing south, we decided to travel along the fence until we found a way back through and around the men. We had no idea what was happening to L and K, and we debated calling the police when we were able. But we weren't meant to be lighting fires and didn't want to get into trouble. After a while, we came across a section we could hop over safely and into a less dense part of the forest. We had no signal on our phones and couldn't call either L or K to see if they were okay. We continued a little while longer and came across an exit to the forest. We couldn't hear anything from behind us, but we could see some houses in the distance. We decided to head to the house and under street lamps before deciding what to do next. But as we go closer, we could see that K and L were already under a street lamp near the houses. We ran up to them and asked them what had happened. They went on to say that they decided to hide because L had his guitar and couldn't effectively run with it. And it worked. The men arrived at the fire just as K and L hid behind some logs, just outside the firelight. They said the men looked to be a lot older than us and seemed very aggressive with what they thought were crowbars or something similar. As the men were shouting for us and talking, L and K managed to make their escape. As they were walking towards the edge of the forest, they noticed a pickup truck parked on a logging trail with its headlights on but no one inside. We think this was their truck. They then ran out and towards the local houses, where they found us. We went back to that forest a few more times, but never ventured as deep, and only during the day. Okay, so before I start this story, I want to give some context. I grew up in a town called Luther, Michigan, in the middle of the Manistee Forest. I'm talking small, like a population of 300 people. I lived with my grandpa at the time, and we lived in a small one-bedroom cabin he built deep in the woods. And to even get to it, you need to drive down a 2-mile, 2-track. So needless to say, unless you know who my grandpa is, or your family no random person is going to accidentally walk into our front yard out there. So now that I painted the picture, let me tell you the story. I must have been about 7, 8 years old or so, as I said. It was a small one-bedroom cabin, so my bedroom was actually the living room. And we had this giant window looking out to the front area of the house. During the day, you could see the driveway, the shed, my grandpa's project cars and trucks, and various farm stuff we had. But at night, pitch black, like someone put a black blanket over the entire house. My bed was positioned right up against this window, so I'd be sleeping right next to this window. As I said, it's small, so space was a premium. So I'd just curl up with my back against the window and fall asleep. I was a pretty heavy sleeper as a kid, so I'd be out the whole night. One night, after I said my prayers and got ready for bed, my grandpa tucked me into bed and sat by the fire to read his Bible. Most nights he'd read his Bible till I fell asleep, then go back in his room and go to sleep himself. And this night was no different. He got in his chair, took out his Bible, and started to read. So I slowly fell asleep. I must have been asleep for maybe 3 or 4 hours when I woke up. My grandpa fell asleep in the chair and my back was hurting, so I turned around on my other side. So now my face was staring out the window, and I was about to just close my eyes and go back to bed when I swear I saw a silhouette of what looked like a man standing right outside the window. Keep in mind it was already pitch black out there, so this means he would have to be standing like inches from the glass. At first, I thought I was seeing things, so I blinked a few times, and it was still there. I remember feeling super scared, and I don't move. Maybe I thought if I didn't move, whoever it was would think I was asleep and just leave. But the shadow didn't leave. And once my eyes adjusted, I could in fact make out a man with stubble standing practically right against the glass. Again, I didn't move. The man then knew down where his face was at level with mine and looked right at me. I fucking started crying so bad. I was shaking, and that woke up my grandpa. When my grandpa got out of his chair, the man took off into the woods. My grandpa came over, started to rub my back, and he asked what was wrong, and I told him what I saw. Now I had a rough childhood, and if I lied to anyone, I'd get my ass beat. So he knew I wouldn't make this up. My grandpa turned on the house lights, went into his room, and came out with a shotgun and went outside. He was out there for probably 10 minutes, but felt like hours. And he came back in and his face was spooked. My grandpa was a Green Beret in Vietnam. He doesn't scare like at all, but he looked freaked out. He came over to me and said he'll stay up with me tonight and even let me watch TV all night, which he never let me do. And the whole night he sat facing the door of the cabin with that shotgun. The morning came and the first thing he did was put curtains over all the windows. Then we went outside and sure enough, there were footprints in the dirt leading out into the deep woods. After that, I wasn't allowed to play in the woods alone anymore, and my grandpa moved my bed away from the window. Now, about a week or so later, my grandpa was watching the news after dinner, and there was a story about a recently escaped prisoner that was found near Becky Trail outside Luther. The 2-track that lead my cabin was Becky Trail. He was hiding out in a hunting shack about a mile away from where we were. To this day, being alone in the woods at night scares the shit out of me. At the time I was 13, my friend just turning 16. We are both female. Me and my friend, for the sake of the story, let's call her Amy. We were bored at my home and my dad was away from the house, leaving just us there. So we wanted to go shopping in this one shop I told her about. It was getting a bit late, like maybe about 7 p.m, but we figured it could still be open. However, this shop was quite far from the house, but I knew a shortcut, that being through the woods. Taking that shortcut was my biggest mistake. We left the house, and it was still fairly bright outside. We were just walking and talking, and we go through the woods. There's rarely anyone there, apart from maybe some old man walking his dog, and I always used to go through those woods as a child with my parents, and I always thought of it as being safe. We mindlessly walk until I notice a man with his hood up, smoking. I whispered to Amy, "Hey, look," and she grabs my arm. Just to be safe, we both went around him so he wouldn't see us, but we are pretty sure he did. The sun begins to set, and we reach the shop, only to realize it's closed. So we turn back the same way we came from. We completely forget about the encounter we had like 10 to 20 minutes ago, and we just talk. and laugh. I look in front of us, where we're walking, and we see someone. I'm 90% sure it was the same guy. I freeze. Amy tracks where I'm looking, and she grabs my arm again, and we go off the trail to some place that I didn't recognize. We ran for a bit, then went back on the trail, thinking we lost him. We look back. He's right. Fucking behind us, sprinting full speed towards us. Amy, still clinging to my arm, begins running and pulling me with her. She asks me, which way should we turn, while pointing towards the woods, and then pointing to some area I didn't really know how to get back home from. Now, it being dark out, obviously we wouldn't go in the woods. With little thinking, we go towards the area I didn't really recognize. We keep running. Looking back, he's still there. We see some lady in the distance, and we immediately rush to her. My throat was so sore, I could barely breathe. This lady was on her phone just standing there, and we tell her, "We are being chased, please. Can we stay with you for a while?" And this lady completely pays no mind to us, as if this is a normal thing for her to hear. At least, that was the last time we saw that man. Amy tries getting her phone out, but it's dead. I get mine out, but I have no data and can't go on Google Maps to find our way back home. I knew the area we were in. I just wasn't too sure how to get back home from there. I look around us, and we begin to walk towards the way I thought was right. Finally, we walked until I recognized where we were. So I led the rest of the way, still paranoid that he's behind us. We kept looking back. In order to get back home, we were forced to go the rest of the way through the woods. I thought this was a horrible idea, but at least I wasn't alone. After all, I saw her as a big sister, and I don't know what would have happened if she wasn't there. And I don't think I want to know. We go through the woods, and I pull out my phone flashlight, because at this point, it's pitch black. I was shaking. Amy was also tense. We eventually make it back home safely, and we never told anyone about this story. It was a secret of ours. We weren't even supposed to leave the house, especially as it was getting dark. This experience stayed with us. Well, at least for me. I'm not sure. Anyway, a few months after that happened, I was watching some YouTube documentary, some true crime stuff. It was based in the same exact area that I got chased. Even the images used in the video were of the literal same street we got chased on, and it was about some kid that apparently murdered his whole family over a video game. Graphic stuff. I told my mum about it, and she tells me this, "Didn't you know that area is dangerous?" It's probably the most dangerous area in my town. And I was shocked. I didn't even tell her the story of what happened to me and Amy, but after that, I did. I don't think she took me very seriously, but I hope this goes to show that you can't trust anyone, and you should be careful going anywhere as a young woman, especially at night, because you never know what might happen, even if you're with someone. And to this day, I still think to myself, what would have happened if me and Amy didn't react quicker? This happened a few days ago in my local public forest/park in the South UK. It's a well-used area with dog walkers, runners, and cyclists, even into the evening. I walk my dog there regularly and know the routes well. It was around 5 p.m, just after dusk. There was still a bit of ambient light left, but the forest itself was dark. I was making my way home and had just crossed a pedestrian bridge over the M23 to get onto the side I needed. From the bridge, there's a one-way path that curves left and slopes downward, with tall bushes on both sides. The path dips slightly about 50 meters in, and then rises again. Because of the curve and the bushes, visibility ahead is poor, especially in low light. As I started down the slope, my dog suddenly froze about 15 feet ahead of me. She wears a small red collar light, and when she stopped, that light briefly illuminated a very tall, skinny figure around 6'7" to 6'8" feet, standing in the lowest point of the dip, directly in the middle of the path. I hadn't shone my torch at them yet, but there was enough light spill from the bridge and my movement for them to know I was approaching. They were already positioned there, facing uphill towards me, effectively blocking the route. In front of them was an old, discolored suitcase, torn at the edges, with the handle propped upright. At that point I realized I couldn't easily turn back. The bridge behind me was exposed and would have meant retreating deeper back into the forest. I didn't want to initiate a chase. I made the decision to keep walking at a normal pace, pretending I hadn't noticed them, because I knew if I stopped, I'd likely freeze. As I got closer, the figure appeared to grow in size due to the slope and lack of visual reference points. They were very tall, wearing a long, dark, point-hooded, draped garment that went down to their feet and was shaped like an upside-down rhombus/triangle. I still hadn't shone my torch directly at them because I didn't want to escalate or provoke anything unnecessarily. I had a 1,000 lumen walking torch, a clipped dog lead with a heavy metal buckle clasp, and a metal flask on me. My brain was exploding with alarm bells ringing. I was mentally weighing up options second by second. My plan was to use the torch only if I needed a brief opening to get past. When I was close enough that I had no other option, I snapped the torch directly into their face to disorient them and immediately moved past. At that moment they reacted angrily and said, in a deep, low voice, "That's not a good idea." Their face was distorted, gaunt, shallow, covered in black stains, with rotten teeth and yellow around the pupils. I didn't stop. I sprinted uphill past them, into another wooded area off the path that was all uphill, glancing back with the torch to see them trudging through the woods in the darkness after me. I called my dog back, turned off both her collar light and my torch, and broke line of sight as quickly as I could. I kept moving until I was sure there was enough distance, then stayed low and quiet for a short time, before continuing towards civilization. I could hear movement noises, heavy breathing and sticks snapping briefly after, but I wasn't followed out of the woods. I got home safely, but the encounter really shook me, mainly because this is a public park, and the person had clearly heard or seen me coming and chosen to wait in a narrow, dark section of the path. I'm not sure if they're living in the forest or if they just like to scare late walkers. I don't know what their intentions were, and I'm not trying to run what-if sequences in my head because I'm all ready to struggle to make closure of it. I'm not claiming anything supernatural here, just sharing a genuinely unsettling encounter and a reminder to trust your instincts and prioritize getting out over trying to understand someone's intentions in the moment.